Joining me on the More Than Your Age podcast is author, speaker, curriculum writer, and founder and creator of 1000 Hours Outside, Ginny Yurich. Welcome to the show.
Aw, thank you so much for having me. I am thrilled and honored to be here.
I am honored to just get to chat with you. This is a pinch me moment for sure, Ginny, to get the opportunity to speak with you and hear your story. I came across 1000 Hours Outside, I think just 2 years ago. A friend recommended it to me. And ever since then, my parenting worldview has just been transformed and changed. Jenny, I was thinking about this earlier today, and I got teary eyed just thinking all that you've done just through your podcast and the work that you've done. And we're going to get through that. And so I just first want to say thank you.
Aw, all I've ever done is just shared our life. That's it. So I appreciate that. I think that there is power, though, in just sharing your life and sharing what you find and sharing the simple things that make big differences. So that's all I've done. And uh, it doesn't feel like much, but I really appreciate those kind words.
Oh man, it's so much. Well, Jenny, we'll get to all of that. I want to kind of start off and talk about before all of this happened, you were a math teacher, an educator. What led
Mhm.
you to the education profession originally?
Oh, I love kids. Kids are the best. I really love kids. I did a lot of teaching growing up. So I taught in church. I did like the vacation Bible school. So I started that around age 12. And then when I turned 15, I started teaching piano lessons. I taught guitar lessons as well. And then I taught swim lessons at the end of high school, going into college. So I think that I've always just really thought kids are awesome. They're so funny. They're just brilliant little geniuses. They come how they come. So I've always liked kids, and I was pretty good at math. And so that was just kind of the path that just seemed to make the most sense. And I really did love, I taught in the high school. And then I had one year where I taught junior high. I just loved it all. I love the kids. I love the parents. I didn't love the administration as much.
Don't
There
tell
was
them.
some tricky. There was some tricky. They wouldn't even remember me. It's been a long time, but it's been in that part of it is tricky, and there's a lot of things I think that factor in that can make that part of the job hard. But in the classroom time with kids and trying to be innovative and trying to make things exciting and all of that, I just thought was fantastic. And I still keep in touch with a few of the students, and it's really a special thing.
How long were you in the classroom?
I was in the classroom. I always forget. It's like 5 or 6 years. I I don't totally know. There's like student teaching, and then I had one year at a junior high, and then maybe 4 years at the high school, and then I had an administrative year, so somewhere around there.
Yeah. Well, so you said, you always did teaching, whether it was through church and vacation Bible school and then swim lessons, and then you had this love for math, or you said piano and guitar lessons, so
Mhm,
that, that skill was within you. Well, then you decide to quit teaching to stay home with your kids.
mhm.
Why was that a hard decision, and why did you decide to do that?
It was a hard decision. I think it's a hard decision for a lot of people, but I think that my opinion is you get one shot and you get one chance. And the stories, I think what was tricky about it is that it didn't make sense financially. I had this career, I mean, and teaching is a career, and I've been at it 5 or 6 years, and I had a master's degree. So you start to move up the pay scale, and it didn't really make any financial sense to leave. But I had heard all these stories, Erica, from these other moms who had made that choice, and then things worked out for them, like their husband got a promotion or they found another side job that they really liked that they were able to do while maybe the baby was napping or in the evenings, or their mother-in-law would come help, or these different things. And I had heard enough stories from other people that gave me the confidence to make the choice too. And surely the same thing happened for us. I make the decision to say, I'm going to stay home. I'm not coming back next year for this year's schooling. And my husband got a raise at work. And so
Oh, wow.
I just think, I don't know, I guess I don't know if that's always the case, but sometimes I think you have to take the step first, that you have to step into that fear first, and then things sort themselves out. And so I have felt for a long time like we get one shot at this. And I know that not everybody is able to do that, but we really wanted to make a go at it. And it was years of like putting groceries back because we didn't have enough money. And all the clothes that we bought were secondhand at the mom to mom sale where you would have to get there and like fight your way in. But I wouldn't change any of that because I don't remember their clothes, and I don't remember I mean, we survived. So, and little by little things grow and you build your relationship. So, it's really been some beautiful years.
That's wonderful. I had kind of a similar thing too, of where I was working at a job. I was in education too, and
Hmm.
I wanted to stay home with my kids, and it was like, oh my gosh, financially, can we do this? And then my husband even said, if anything, like I'll get an extra job working at the grocery store or whatever.
Mm,
Like we'll move into one bed. We're gonna make it work if this is what you
yeah.
want to do. And I like how you said too. Sometimes you just have to make the first step and
Hmm.
then kind of see what happens. And
Yeah.
as you said too, not everybody is in that same position, but if it is on someone's heart, like absolutely go for
Hmm.
that. Now, when you did stay home, how old were your kids, or did you just have one at the time? What was the
Yeah,
situation
so
like?
we stayed home I started to stay home after our first was born. He was born in June, so that's the summer, and didn't go back to school to teach in the fall. And then our next daughter was born the following October, and then we had one in March. So it was like three in less than 3 years. So they're real close in age. It's so fun. Now they're like, 13, 12, 11, 14, so they're it's
Yeah.
real cool. And but our age gaps definitely get a little wider because it's hard to have the kids that close together, but really neat. I mean, people would always say, look, in 10 years, and that is actually where we're at. But also, then they all have braces at the same time. So this is an interesting, this is an interesting thing. But yeah, we had a couple, I think from the get-go, our oldest is like, more intense personality, didn't sleep much. He ate all the time. He grew really fast. And so I had a hard time, like right from the very beginning. You think you go from doing something that you're really pretty good at. I liked the teaching. I'd been doing it since I was 12. I liked the kids. I knew what I was doing. And then you go to this other time in life where you're flailing a bit, and that's kind of what happened with me.
Well, you said too that, okay, now we all go through braces at the same time. And then I was thinking, and then potentially they will all get married around the same time. So got to save up for
Mhm.
that day.
Right. I know I have a friend, and we just went to her son's wedding last weekend. And so last year she had one that got married last summer, and then this year one got married this summer, and then I think 2 days after the wedding, then the next son proposed. So next summer she's gonna have another one. So yeah, you do kind of end up, and then I'm sure she'll have just like an explosion of grandkids. So it's exciting though. It definitely makes life full and fun.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Now, when you stayed home and you had your three, did were you initially planning to go back into the classroom, or did you think were, was the idea, no, I'm going to go ahead and
Mm.
homeschool? How did that happen?
I think I was wanting to keep up with my certification, however you say that, my certification, just as a backup, but I couldn't even do that. I actually remember this is actually one of my sad moments, Erica. I went, and it was a good moment, but I went. If you're a teacher, and I'm not sure how it is in different states, but in Michigan, you had to keep up with these continuing education credits. Well, at the time, it wasn't online. You actually had to like go in and you had to sign up and you had to go to the class. And I had these three little kids, but I wanted to keep my certificate up because otherwise it lapses. And so I had the three kids. It was like the winter, and I remember going to this college campus to sign up to take these classes to keep my certificate current. And they were little, it was snowing, and like they were like falling on the floor and flopping. And I'm like trying to hold these three kids to go sign up for these things. And I got in and I had to stand in this long line, and I was like 10 years older than everybody else that was standing in the line. The kids were crying, and I just left. And I thought, if I can't even stand in this line to register for the classes, how am I possibly going to manage taking these classes? And I remember I cried. I got in the car and I cried because I felt like it was an end of an era, I felt like a little part of me died, like this is over. Um, but I just knew that I wasn't going to be able to do it. And other things have come up. It's such an interesting thing. I think so often we put ourselves in a box, like this is the only thing that I can do. And here I am podcasting with you. I mean, what a cool thing that as life goes on, that other situations arise, and sometimes they're even more enlightening and more life enhancing. And so what felt like kind of was like a little bit of a death of that part of my life or that part of me has really grown into a lot of other things.
Wow, that's so fascinating. So, you're in this line and the kids are screaming. There's all these fresh college students out getting registering, and so you're like, okay, I'm done. So then you go back and you said, okay, so now what? Now I'm gonna just homeschool, or how did that unfold?
Well, I think I was just keeping that certification up. I don't know why, just because like you don't want to lose it. But we did always have in our minds that we were going to homeschool because, well, here's why. Because the last year that I was in the school system, I wasn't a teacher. I was working in the administration. And what happened was in Michigan, sort of like this wave came through where kindergarten was half day and then all of a sudden kindergarten was full day, and it was like everywhere, and there wasn't really even an option to do anything different. It was like you had all of a sudden it's a full day program, and I happened to be in this phase where they were trying to figure out, the teachers were trying to figure out, well, what are we going to do with that second half of the day? Like these kids are really little and this is a long day for them. And so I would sit in these meetings because I was helping with the math curriculum. I would sit in these meetings where the teachers would be discussing, like, well, the kids, we're going to have a nap time and we're going to want to bring back all the stations. Like they got rid of all the stations. I remember that as a kid, there'd be like the doll station and the art station and the reading corner, and you kind of would rotate through. So they must not have had those anymore. So the teachers were saying, we want to bring that back and we want to have a lot of time to play. But what happened is like the teachers don't really get to make those choices. They don't have the same autonomy that they used to. And so that day went to academics. And we just remember thinking, like with our oldest, that to be gone from, it was 8 to 4:45 was the bus schedule where we lived. The bus came at 8 in the morning, didn't come back till 4:45, filled with academics, and that's such a long day. I mean, that would be such a long day for an adult. 8 to
Mm-hmm.
4:45 and no nap and no less plays, not as much recess. And so simply for the sake of time, we chose to homeschool. And now we have a lot more reasons, but that was our original thought.
Yeah, and I feel like I heard you say this one time, and correct me if I'm wrong, that when your kids were also of the pre-K age too, you did you guys say, well, we're not going to do your traditional pre-K program, and we're going to do that at home?
Yeah, we yes, we haven't really done much of the traditional, but really, Erica, it's been more of a thing of circumstantial that when our oldest son was about to be school age, well, I had three other little kids. And so you're really not in a position where you can traditionally school like an 8 to 4:45 type day. And so it took me down the path of learning that not everyone's school is the same way. And so if that type of schooling works for you and for your family and you like that and your kids like that, great. But you don't have to do it that way. That in some cultures, like in Finland, they don't start academics until around age 7. And in the Waldorf schools, the same thing. And they look for these physical markers like the adult teeth coming in that signifies that the internal organs are all formed. So the eyes are maybe more ready to read and the ears are more ready to hear the differences in the sounds, the phonetics. So it took me down a path of learning that there's not one right way to become educated. And that was really eye opening and freeing for us. And it's been a fun journey. I think that when I was a teacher, and like I said, I really liked being a teacher, but I didn't grow much. It just kind of you come and you do the thing that you're already good at. You tweak it, you enhance it a little bit. There's a little bit of pressure to not tweak it because it's like this tenured thing and you want to kind of like stay in this box. So you're just kind of there, and I felt like a little stagnant, but since we started homeschooling, there's so much growth for everyone because you get this opportunity to learn new ways and to see what's out there that you didn't realize.
Yeah, and from other people and that I know who do homeschool, and just like listening to other people who do it as well, it sounds like you can cater a lot of the education to your children and their gifts and their strengths. And like I think in one of your recent episodes too with is her name For the Love of Homeschooling, I believe.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah, so I heard in her story she was talking about how one of her kids started reading at a young age, and then the other one didn't start until 10 years of age, and that was okay, but she was catering to
Mhm.
those specific needs. And so I think that that's a very unique opportunity. Well, so okay, so
Right.
Jenny, so now you're homeschooling your kids. You made that decision to do that, and on your website you mentioned that you and your husband would take your kids, or you would go to different parks and campsites and trails and national parks, and you saw a lack of children at these places. Why
Mhm.
was this so alarming to both of you?
So this started really right at the beginning. This is actually way before homeschooling. So when the kids were little,
Oh.
I think it's hard to figure out what to do with your kids and how do you pass the time. So when you're a working person, you're working, that takes up most of your day. So I would work and you have to get there at 7, you're there till 3, you've got to grade papers. That's taking up 8 to 10 hours of your day. Well, all of a sudden you have this baby. You're like, "Well, what am I supposed to do? What fills those 10 hours?" And I remember just being really lost with how to manage the time. Partially, Erica, because I had an idea in my head that I was going to do things like by a schedule. There was a book out, and some other my friends were like, they put their kids on this schedule, and so I was like, oh, that'll work. It just didn't didn't work. It didn't work at all for us, and so I had to scrap that idea, and then I just didn't really know what to do. And so I was enrolling our kids in like different programs to try and pass the day. So like we'd go to the swim lesson and the music class and the little gym thing, and it was kind of expensive, but also it was just a whole lot of output for like a 45-minute return. You spend like hours trying to get there and you're exhausted, and hours trying to get home and unload. And it's like, okay, well, now it's only 11 in the morning, and I still have to make lunch, and there's still so much expanse of the day left. So that's kind of how we were doing early childhood, and I was struggling because it was just frankly kind of awful. I it just that's a lot. It's like a circus act trying to get your kids into the library, through the parking lot with all the books and everyone's in a different size diaper and all those different things. So that's sort of how we were doing childhood. And then we switched because a friend of mine had told me that there was this woman named Charlotte Mason who said kids should be outside for like expansive periods of time. Charlotte Mason said 4 to 6 hours whenever the weather is tolerable. So at least she gave that caveat, right? Because we're in Michigan, there's a lot of snow in the winter. It's not always tolerable. And actually, like if you're in the South right now, I've heard it's like 115 degrees. So the weather's not always tolerable, but 4 to 6 hours. And I thought, Erica, like, I don't know anybody. I don't know anybody who does anything at all for 4 hours. Like all these kids programs are 45 minutes or 30 minutes or, and it doesn't even hardly keep their attention at that. They're squirming. So I just thought the idea seemed outlandish, but we tried it one time back in 2011 with a friend, and she brought her 3 kids, and I brought my 3 little kids, and they were all preschool and under. And I tell you what, it was a fantastic day because those kids just played, and we held our babies, and we sat under this beautiful, tree park, and it was, the fall, and the weather was gorgeous, and the kids would come back and forth and get food, and it passed the day in a way that was very meaningful. Everyone felt really good, and there was like a little bit of a respite for me as well, a little bit of refreshment. So that's when things change, and so we tried to build those times into our life on a regular basis where we were getting out for these large period of times, and it was enhancing our lives so much, like my life and the kids life and our family. But we never ran into another kid. We did it for 2 years, and we live in a pretty
Crazy.
populated area. We're in Metro Detroit. No kids on the trails. It's only grandparents. No kids at the little park. No kid. There was no one. We ran into one mom one time, and we like bombarded her because we are like, there's never, and she had just moved to the area, so. So it's just an interesting thing to see that. And the thought more was, this is so life enhancing. Other people are missing this. And so was I. I didn't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating. Just like once I started adopting the idea of being outside more, thanks to you, I would invite friends, and they're like, "Well, what are we gonna do? We gotta schedule things." And I'm like, "No, you're supposed to just let them play." And it's so funny because, like you said, you go to the library and you have this scheduled 45-minute thing, and you do
Hmm.
the music lesson or whatever, which is fine and great, but at the same time, like you said, it's just like so overwhelming, and there's just so much to do.
Hmm.
And so, okay, so you find this, you see this lady, you bombard her, you want to let's be friends. You're outside too.
Right.
And then you guys decide, or you decide to start tracking your hours. Why did you think that that was necessary?
So what I did actually was I added up how much time we were spending outside. So for about 2 years, we were getting together with this. small group of other moms who were fine to go outside for 4 hours. So you talk about like with your friends who were fine to go and just we would find spots that were safe. So like maybe a big field, we're not close to cars, and the kids could just kind of wander. Or we would go on short hikes and there'd be, 4 or 5 moms that would come and, 10, 15 kids. And we did that for a couple years. And then in that time, I was starting to notice, and really very quickly, how everyone was thriving. So it's like our kids were eating better, they were sleeping better, they were getting along better, they were happier. I was doing better. And so it led me down the path to different books and different pieces of research that talk about how simple time outside, now you don't have to plan anything, like you just go. It helps it helps us all with our development. Like it helps us emotionally and it helps us with our social skills, especially our kids. It helps with cognitive development when we're walking on uneven ground and we're trying things that challenge our body. It helps with cognition and neural wiring, and it's helping with our physical bodies. And so I started reading some books about that type of thing. And I had come across a statistic that said that kids were outside for 4 to 7 minutes on average, but on their screens for 4 to 7 hours a day. So 4 to 7 minutes a day versus 4 to 7 hours. And so because I was a math teacher, it just piqued my curiosity. And I thought, well, I wonder how much time we're spending outside. So I went kind of through, we were getting together with this little nature group 2 to 3 times a week for 4 to 6 hours. Then we do something on the weekend as a family. And so it was like 18 to 20 hours a week on average, give or take. Less in the winter in Michigan, more in the summer. But that added up to 1,200 hours a year. And at that time, that was the exact amount of time that kids were on screens every year in America, the average 1,200 hours a year. And I just remember that that stuck with me so much because I thought, not that we're against screens, because we're not, and our kids like to play video games and they like to play an iPad or watch cartoons and things. But I thought, well, what if those 1,200 hours had gone to screens? Like we had such a full life. Those 1,200 hours represented relationship and they represented fun and laughter and movement and growth. And I thought, well, if that would have gone to screens, like what a less fulfilling life. And so it sort of came from there where I thought if if I can intentionally incorporate this amount of time, which is there, it exists, it's just going to screens. If I
Hmm.
can intentionally try and aim for that, this is going to solve all sorts of modern parenting problems. It's going to help my kids grow as whole children. It's going to help me be a more present and happy mother. And it's going to help with the screen time problem that I think a lot of us are facing if we have screens in the home, which is trying to keep a balance. So it came from there. It came from sort of a piqued interest into how much time we were spending outside. And then there's research that backs it. Angela Hanscom wrote a book that said, it's called Balanced and Barefoot. It's a great book. She says about 3 hours a day is ideal for kids to play outside. And if you look back decades into the past, I think that was sort of naturally woven into society. Like we had three recesses when I was a kid. There was like morning, lunch, and afternoon, and they were all 45 minutes or maybe an hour. So it used to be woven into the fabric of society, and it's just not anymore.
Yeah, it is a shame how little amount of time that kids get in for recess and being outside. And so you see this, you start tracking your hours, and all the research says that you should get at least 3 hours outside every single day. Well, eventually you come to create 1,000 hours outside. Walk us through how you decided, okay, well, we were tracking, now let's track 1,000 hours outside, and then now let's share it with people. Walk us through how that kind of progressed.
Well, so we had come up with this 1,200 hours. That's about how many hours we were spending outside, but that's not a very catchy name. So I just thought, well, look, look, if the premise is if you are intentional about nature time, if you're intentional about getting outside, and maybe you're not going to hit 1,000 hours, maybe you're going to hit 602, whatever. But if you're intentional about it, you're going to do it more. You're going to be looking for opportunities to eat your meal on the deck. You're going to be taking your card game outside or your homework and sitting under a tree, taking your book. You start to look for these different opportunities that enhance your life. And so from the beginning, it was sort of this thought of striving for balance. Like if our kids are getting that much screen time, then at the very least, they should at least be getting that much real life interaction as well. So it started there. it was right after I figured out how much time we were spending outside. I thought, you know what? I'm going to write about this because it was so life changing for me as a mom. I went from really struggling to thriving in a day. I mean, our life completely turned around. I mean, I was miserable. I love my kids, but I
Yeah.
was miserable dragging them from one thing to the next. I was exhausted. I just felt like I was always failing. It was always a juggle. And then things changed in one day. So I thought, well, I'm just going to share my story and truth be told, I shared my story for many, 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 many years before anyone ever looked my way.
Okay, so that kind of leads me into another question of when you did first start doing this and you were sharing your story, did you, besides the fact that you were you were happy, your kids were happy, and like this was just transforming the way that your kids were growing up and that you were parenting, did you ever once think that this was going to turn into a business endeavor?
Oh no, no, because everyone was like, that's a silly idea. That's the worst idea I've ever heard. But then now sometimes people say to me, this is so funny. Now people say to me, I wish I would have thought of that. And I was like, no, you don't. Because like 8 years ago, people would have been like, you're weird. But this is truly how people used to live. This is how kids used to spend their time. They used to spend a chunk of it playing outdoors, free play, and that really enhanced their lives. And so, no, I never imagined. But what is interesting is that technology has really continued to creep into childhood, it creeps into the schools, it is everywhere. And so the message continues to be pertinent that if we're intentional about trying to get outside, and it can be very simple things, it will do a lot for your kids.
Yeah. And, something you said too just a little bit ago that I think is important for people to hear, especially parents who are working outside of the home and they may not have the full-time day to be with their kids, is that it doesn't have to be 1,000 hours. It's just being intentional with being outside. So you're home from work. Let's go outside. Let's have dinner on the patio. Let's go for a walk. Let's try to be outside because that's going to make a change. And so
Mhm.
I love that you said that. So, okay, you started this movement, and like you said, no one, it took a while for people to catch on. People were like, you're crazy. And after engaging with people on social media about their love for nature, you decided to write a children's book, The Little Farmhouse in West Virginia, which I love the name. My daughter's name is Virginia. So it's,
So
even though
is
it's not about,
mine.
really? Oh, your name's
Yes,
Ginny. Ginny, that's right.
that is so cool. What a fun
Yeah.
connection. I love that.
Yeah, it's a beautiful name.
I
She's
was
named
named
after
after
my
my
grandma.
grandma. Yeah, there we go. There we go.
Of
Do you
course,
call
it's
her
a great
Virginia
name.
then?
I do.
Did she go?
Yeah,
That's so cool. I love
yeah,
it.
yeah. She's sweet. Well, okay, so you decided to write a children's book. What made you decide to write the book? And then because your background is math, had you ever thought you would write a book or create a book?
No, no, now I have a ton of books. I
Yeah.
have 4 books. 3 of the 4 all have the same name, which is ridiculous because I'm not super creative. And then I have another book coming out in November. The one coming out in November, I'm super excited about. It's called Until the Streetlights Come On. It's about how a return to play brightens our today and prepares kids for an uncertain future, which is really just this premise of we can have a really good today and a fulfilled today, and that is what prepares our kids for tomorrow, especially in a world that's rapidly changing. But that's coming out in November. It has its own title. But the first book I did was a kid's book, and I had put a question out on social media asking people about their earliest childhood memories in nature. And the responses were so heartwarming, and a lot of them had to do with grandparents or aunts and uncles. And so I just was thinking back to some of my first experiences outdoors that really meant a lot to me. And they were on my great uncle's farm in West Virginia. And so, just prompted by other people's responses, I thought, well, I'll just write out my story. It's a story of how you can go somewhere and there's no toys. Like my great aunt and uncle could never have kids. And so they lived on this little farmhouse that was really small in West Virginia, in Buchanan, West Virginia. And they had a dairy farm and cats and dogs. And they did a lot of homegrown food and it always smelled good in the kitchen. And so we just loved going there, even though they didn't have any toys hardly at all because they'd never had their own kids. And you just had this space to roam. So it really left an impact on me. They had a little pond where you could go fishing and they had a big barn. There was always little kittens. And so that's where that book comes from. I think it's to prompt the conversation that we can have adventures with very little. and have really
Mhm.
fulfilling experiences simply.
Yeah, that's sweet. I do have more questions for you about your book coming out, and we'll get to that in just a little bit. I'm loving just kind of hearing the progression of how you got to where you are right now, because I just think it's really neat of like, well, the whole concept of this podcast is being more than your age, being more than just a homeschool mom or just a mom. I hate the just a. And so
Yeah.
being able to see how you had this idea, then you decide to write this children's book, and then now you're focusing on being outside with your children, and your business starts to grow. Like you said, you
Mhm.
wrote a few other books. Now you have merchandise, and you have a podcast, and you have all these things. And so as these new things start developing, how were you and how are you still currently able to spend that quality time with your kids being outside while managing this business? Because you're interviewing, you're having episodes come out regularly. You're interviewing these doctors and authors and other speakers and other homeschool curriculum writers like yourself, and I would imagine that can potentially overtake the whole mission and purpose of what you're doing. And so, to my question is, how are you able to find the balance or manage or do the things that you're really wanting to do?
Mm-hmm. It's a good question. It's one of those things that like things just I really, really believe that if you live like the best today, then tomorrow takes care of itself. That's what I believe. So I think that in my mind, I have like a priorities, right? It's like, well, this 1,000 hours outside thing is a top priority. Our family is a top priority. Friends are a top priority. For us, God is a top priority. So you have these priorities, and what happens is I think if you can, for the most part, not always, but if for the most part you can keep them in an order, then then the other things tend to take care of themselves. So I'll give you an example. Our friend's son got married last Saturday. And on Sunday, we went over to help clean up. And on Sunday, I was supposed to edit a podcast, but I didn't because we were over helping clean up, and it just didn't go out on Monday. And so it still hasn't gone out. But I don't know, but it doesn't really seem to matter. So I don't know if that seems really naive. That's kind of how we live, which is like, what are the key things for today? What am I responsible for today? Who are we touching shoulders with today? And then the rest of it, like, I'll keep books with me when we're driving. So if my husband's driving, I'm reading while we're going somewhere. Or I always have a book in my purse. So, if we stopped and maybe we're eating at a restaurant, I might pull it out for 10 minutes. I just put the things sort of in the nooks and crannies, and it just has worked. So I don't know if that's good advice or bad advice. Like, I'm like one of those types of people. I had my first book, actually, Erica, is an interesting story. I got uh someone reached out from a publishing company and asked me to write like this child's activity book, which is not actually really my thing. Like kind of what you were talking about. I'm more like, let's just go on a hike, find what you want to find, play with a stick, whatever. But kids' activities are fun, especially nature activities. They are endearing, and it gives you a little bit of a structure to your day. But this company reached out and asked if I would write this book. Well, then then I had to interview. It was like this really weird thing. I was like, well, you already asked me if I would
Yeah.
do it. Then I had to do an interview after. And one of the interview questions was like, well, where do you see your business in a year and a half? Or where do you see your business in 5 years? And I'm like, I don't know. I only just do today. I mean, that probably
Well,
sounds silly, but that's how I've lived
no.
for the last, decade, and it has worked out.
Well, and
Here
I
we
love
sit.
that. Yeah, I think that's great. And just like the thing that you said too, that this weekend you were helping clean up, you were supposed to edit a podcast, but it was a priority to help your friends clean up. And so you said, well, the podcast will wait. The episode will come out when it needs to come out. And that's
Yeah.
awesome. Yeah, maybe some business coach would say, be consistent, stay consistent, do this and this and this. And it's like, you
I
know
mean, that
what?
is what
You
they say. And that is the tricky part, Erica. Like that's what's so bizarre. That is exactly what they say. They say, what is the best thing? How do you make your podcast successful? Well, what they say to do is to make sure that it comes out. Everybody knows yours comes out on Mondays and Thursdays, or yours comes out. And ours is so all over the place. Like it comes out like this week there's one, and next week there's four, and sometimes there's two. And I mean, and our podcast is like a top ranked podcast. So sometimes I think we get hung up on the rules that people put out there. And I just think if you're passionate about your life, I don't know, it sounds naive, but I just think things fall into place.
Uh, I, I love that. I really do because, I mean, and for type A people, do those type A things, right? I'm not super type A
Yeah.
myself, so I'm like I'm feeling what you're what you're telling. It's just like, okay,
Yeah,
just
you
do
have
it
to go
and
with your own personality. Like we had a friend come stay. So our oldest son, one of his best friends moved to Tennessee. So like in the summer sometimes he'll come stay with us or our son will go stay there for a little bit. So we went, we picked him up. He's staying at our house and we didn't know for how long. Like, is he going to stay a week, a month? We don't really, how are we going to get him back? Nobody really knew. So I was talking to another friend about that and she was like, how can you possibly do that? She was like, when is he going home? I was like, I don't know. She was like, how is he getting home? I was like, I don't know. Like at some point we'll figure that out, but that's for a different day. Today he's here and we're happy to have him. And so it's just, yeah, I think that you do have to live life according to your personality and what works for you and what makes you tick. And so if you're more type A and you like to have goals, like I love John Acuff. And we do have a goal. We have a goal of getting outside. John Acuff talks a lot about goals. And so I think to each their own, but for me, keeping the balance just means I have a list of priorities and I keep at the top what is the most important, and the other stuff hopefully works out.
well, as you know, you've added on podcast author, speaker, and curriculum writer, and all these things. How has your life transformed and changed since the inception of 1,000 Hours Outside? I mean, outside of going
Right.
outside all the time, but the business.
I mean, it feels really the same. So we've gotten the opportunity to rub shoulders with some other people that come in and help, which is really cool. So different people take some different parts of things, but really it's just the same. I think it's weird, a little weird to get asked to speak at different things, like things that you're like, well, I used to attend this, so I wasn't ever expecting to speak at such and such. But I do love that too. And so our life has just become really more full. We have more opportunities. We travel a little bit more. Our kids get to meet people all over the country. We get to go to different places outside all over the country. And it is just this daily strive to make sure that it's not too much work and that the main things stay the main things. So I mean, it's been fun. What's changed? Sometimes people know me, like when we go places, that's fun. Also kind of awkward. So that's changed a little bit, but mostly things are just they're really the same. And this is a cool thing, Erica, about getting outside. And this is what I didn't know 10 years ago or 12 years ago, because really we started changing our schedule. It was the fall of 2011. So it's been 12 years. And we had kids that were 3 and under at that time, 3 and under. And now I have 5 kids. And so we've added on kids and now we're into the teenage years. And prioritizing time outside still works. It looks different. It actually looks like a little bit more fun because I don't have to carry everything and I don't have to pack everything for everyone and they can get their own water and like that type of stuff. But we can do really neat things. We just went to West Virginia and we did a whitewater rafting down the New River because the minimum age is 6 and so now our youngest can do that with us and that was so fun. We just went down and did an overnight and rafted down the river and it's a little bit of whitewater. It was such a cool experience. So our life, I think, looks very similar to what it did 12 years ago, just I think maybe a little bit more enhanced.
Yeah, that sounds incredible. A very neat opportunity that your kids get to do. I think that that's wonderful. So,
Mhm.
at the beginning, I said to you, this was a pinch me moment. And I also want to just reiterate this whole movement and the things that you have done and just the people you've spoken with through your podcast and then your books and everything as well. I say to you, your movement has been life changing and transformative for my family. And I know thousands others as well. So when you hear comments like that, what makes you most proud?
Aw. I don't think I'm really proud. I just think like this is what we do in life, right? Like we just share what works. I mean, that's really all I've done. That's it. That's it. That's all I did was I shared like, look, I found this thing that for our family that paying attention to how much time we spend outside is changed our life too. So it's like your story is the same as mine. I didn't make it up. It was Charlotte Mason did and Angela Hanscom and she wrote about it in Balance and Barefoot. And there are stacks and stacks of books, Erica, that I didn't write that I've read from other people, like Dr. Carla Hannaford when you're talking about Samantha from For the Love of Homeschooling, and she said, I have one kid that read at 3 and one kid that read at 10. Well, I talked to this Dr. Carla Hannaford who wrote a phenomenal book called Smart Moves about how learning and movement are intrinsically related. And she also didn't learn to read till she was 10. She's a PhD. And so
Wow.
all these people have come before and have researched and they have spent their time teaching people like Dr. Peter Gray. He's got this book Free to Learn where he talks about how kids are biologically designed to self-educate and all the Waldorf people and the Finland people and all, So I don't know. I would you'd say I'm proud. I would say I'm honored. That's what I would say. I'm honored to play a small role in the lives of other people and I am thankful for the other people that have come before me that have chosen to share what works for them. And those things have changed my life.
Well, and that I think that says a lot about your humility. And so I just appreciate that too. The fact that you're giving recognition to those before you and then also, hey, this is what's working. Let me help other people. I think that that's huge. Well, we have this whole movement that I keep saying. You started a podcast 2 years ago. Congratulations, by the way. As of
Thank
today,
you.
I looked. You have 181 episodes where you have interviewed like-minded authors and parents and doctors and so many people who believe in the mission of what you believe as well. And the podcast is my favorite. Just want to let you know that too. And
Oh,
now
thank
you have a
you.
new book coming out in November. I've already pre-ordered. I would love
Oh.
for you to share what you would like about your podcast, and then please just share. I know you did a little bit about your book, but please share more in detail so that the listeners can take a look into that and purchase it, of course.
Aw, thank you. Okay, well, the podcast is Herky Jerky. We've already talked about that, right? It comes out on no significant schedule. It just comes out. But what a gift, Erica. Like how it goes. Like you send out these requests and you ask for someone to come on and you're like, I mean, I have danced jigs around my house. To hear back from someone I would never think I would get a chance to talk to some of these people. I read their books 10 years ago and it changed our whole childhood. You never think you're going to get the opportunity to get a chance to talk with them. So ours is a little bit all over the place. It definitely centers around outdoors, it centers around childhood, but there's stuff in there about entrepreneurship and family and walking. And so they're all kind of uh, a mixed bag of things, but wow, are people gracious? And it's such a gift to spend an hour with someone and talk about like what are the biggest things in their life that have been the most life changing. So I talked to this woman recently named Annabelle Abbs, and she wrote a book called 52 Ways to Walk. And she talks just about the power of simple walking and humming and how these different things like they affect your immune system. And then I talked to this woman recently named Michaeline Duclef, and she's seen parenting all over the globe. She wrote a book called Hunt, Gather, Parent, and she talks about how in other cultures they don't yell at their kids and they don't get all worked up about things and how do they do that. And so just these fascinating conversations. And I think that it's about finding like what are the small things that other people have found that have changed their lives and can I incorporate some of that about friendship and community. So it's just a really cool thing. I have no idea when the next episode's coming out, but there will be more. And so I don't know. That's how it goes. People are gracious to stick around. That's what I say. I'm always like, thank you, because I'm not doing it like how everyone says you're supposed to do. I mean, I don't even have like, you've got a cool microphone. I'm like, I got my teleprompter thing here. I don't know, whatever. It's like a customer service. May I help you? So, but I love it. Don't you love it, Erica? Isn't it such a
Oh, yes.
gift?
It
It's
is.
such
And
a
you
cool
just hear
thing.
it is. You hear people's stories that, like you said, you can take a little bit from somebody else and then apply it to your life. And then you know for sure that no matter what, somebody, maybe if it's just one person, is going to listen and that's going to impact their lives. And it's like, well, then that's worth
Yeah.
it, right?
Yeah, and
Absolutely. Well, okay.
yeah, you rub shoulders with a lot of people. You can help them connect with each other. So that's real cool. And then the book comes out November 14th. It's called Until the Streetlights Come On. It's something that people would say a lot. Like I used to have freedom, and I would play until the streetlights came on. And I think that in the last several decades, things have really changed. A lot with the No Child Left Behind, a lot in our educational system. Like teachers used to have autonomy in the classroom and they used to be able to do what they want. And within the last several decades, it's just become so standardized, and childhood has become so standardized. And there's a lot of fear. There's a lot of fear that if we don't start now, if we don't put our kids in the sports at age 3, and if we don't start the violin lessons at age 4, and if we don't have them in French immersion class on the weekends, like they're going to fall behind. But I think what's so cool is that our world has changed and it's changing all the time. And the best way to set people up for a changing world is for them to be resilient and for them to be creative and for them to have grit and for them to be okay to fail and for them to have good social skills. Because they say now kids are going to have 4 different jobs within that decade of coming out of college. It's like people in generations past, they would have one job. They would have one job that lasted for 30 years. They'd only have to ever know one set of coworkers. But now, like, things are such in flux, and that feels scary. But actually, I think it's a really exciting time because what it means is that we can trust play. We can lean back, we can pull back and know that the things that are open ended and the times when kids have to draw from their own inner resources, this is what is going to set them up for a rapidly changing world. And so it's a message of hope. I always say that we can do less and gain more through play and through outside time. So it's coming out November 14th. They always do those pre-order bonuses, but this one's fun because we have an outdoor cooking book with kids. It's like a digital cookbook that comes for free if people pre-order, and then you get your own tracker sheet. It's like a specially designed one just for people that pre-order the book. So all that information is on our website. There's like a form that you fill out. So it's super fun, but I think it just goes back to the concept of trying to invest in today and not it's hard, but try not to be so fearful about tomorrow and knowing that each day takes care of itself. And this old way of trying to prepare our kids for college when they're 6 and working on their college resume things when they're 9, and that way doesn't work anymore. And that's a good thing. That's like a gift, right? That we can really enjoy our kids today as they are and give them opportunities to grow in holistic ways, knowing that then they'll be ready for what tomorrow holds for them. Because we don't know. We don't know what jobs are going to be out there in 10 years. We've never even heard of them.
Right. Yeah.
That's how
They're
things are
changing
changing.
daily.
So they are changing daily, absolutely. And there's a lot of jobs that are obsolete that used to exist and they don't exist anymore. And so new ones are coming. And when we allow our kids to play, that helps all of those functionalities, all of those things in their brain. It helps their brains be quicker. It helps them be more creative. It helps all that. In fact, I had a friend recently whose son went to go for a job interview. And the question that they asked him was the main question was, did you play with Legos as a kid? The question was not like what level math did you get to? What grade did you get in your AP bio class? It's not that. It's like, did you play? Are you creative? Can you come up with alternative solutions? And so that all comes through self Dr. Peter Gray calls it self-structured. A lot of people say unstructured, but like not adult directed time. So like the pressure's off. This is a good message.
Yeah. Well, I can't wait to get your book, and I will definitely put that in the show notes too, along with your website and everything else. But I have a couple more questions for you, Jenny, before
Yeah.
we head out. I wanted to know for you personally, whenever I feel like you're just listening to your story and then outside looking in, everything just kind of unfolded. You had this idea, you share your story, you write your first book, and then you have another book, and then you create merchandise and all this stuff. And so as you decided to create and develop this business, was there ever a thought in your mind of, I'm too old to do this. Like, I can't do this. Or I'm too, I can't, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm a teacher by trade. Did you ever struggle with that? And if so, or if not, what were some other lies that you had to overcome in order to pursue this business?
Yeah, I definitely felt, and I do feel like we have no idea what we're doing. I don't know. I don't know how to do a podcast. I don't know how to write books. And in fact, that first publisher, Erica, that contacted me to write this book, and then I ended up doing it, and I had to do the photography, which I wasn't good at either. I'm not good at writing. I'm not good at photography. I wasn't like super keen on nature crafts. It turned out to be super cute. But I wrote the book, Erica, and then it was completely done. They had designed one chapter, and then because of COVID, they canceled it. They canceled it. So we ended up having to self-publish it, which that was a whole set of skills that we didn't have. We didn't know how to do that. So you had to learn something new. But I think that these things happen, and you have to rise to the occasion, and then you learn skill sets for something else down the future. But I remember at the very beginning having these thoughts of, I had all these kids. We had 5 kids under in 8 years, and remember thinking like, I don't really have enough time to put to this. And sometimes I would look at other people, and maybe their kids were in school or they just had more time. They had better backgrounds. They had worked at this place and worked at that place and worked with app developers. And I remember at certain times feeling like, oh, well, if only I had that, or if only I were in that situation. But I just really think that things come with time, and that if you just are faithful and you stick with your stuff and you do what you can for that day, things will grow on their own timeline. And I have always really liked this quote from a book called, I think it's called On it's something I think it's called Being There. It's about motherhood in the first 3 years, and I actually just saw it on my bookshelf the other day. I read it a long time ago, but one of the quotes was, "As a mom, you can do everything, just not all at the same time." And that really gave me permission to allow things to unfold on their own timeline. Like, sure, like I bet you we could be way further along, or we could have been further along years ago, but that would have meant not adventuring with our kids, and that's what the
Mhm.
most important thing is. So yeah, I've thought about that too. Like my first book came out, I don't know how old I was. I'm going to be 43 in October, so this is my first, like, this one that's coming out until the streetlights come on. This is like with an actual publisher and the whole thing, and I'm 43. That's kind of old. Other people come out with books when they're 33 and 23. So yeah, I definitely think I've had the thoughts of, well, I'm behind the 8 ball here. But what can you do?
Exactly. And I think that's so cool because like you said, you're going to be 43 and you're having your like you said your first not self-published book, and that's this whole concept of being more than like letting that number define you, and you have this idea and you're going to do it, and if it's in a different timing than what you thought, like if that meant previously that it was going to take time away from your kids, and you're like, well, I don't want that. So if we're going to focus on the
Hmm.
kids and we'll do this as we're able to. And so I think that's huge. I think that's huge for other people to listen to as well. Okay, my last question, and this is one that I
Hmm.
like to ask everybody as well, and I'm kind of going to reword it just a little bit. But so you could have used the mentality that you were just a homeschool mom or a former teacher who doesn't know business to stop you from pursuing 1,000 hours outside, but you didn't. And there are other people who may have the same desire to start something, whatever that may be. And it doesn't have to be a business, it's just something that they want to start, but they feel limited. If you could encourage just one woman who feels limited to pursue a dream or a goal based on her age or life circumstance, what would you tell her?
Well, I think you have to reframe it. And this is what changed things for us. I also, while I was passionate about 1,000 hours outside, I also wanted to have a venue for our kids to learn real world business skills. So I wanted them to be able to send an email that really mattered. I wanted them to be able to pick out t-shirt colors, to try real world things. And so by having an extra motivation, that has helped me to keep going. And even to this day, I want to be able to hire people. Like, I want to be a person that can help provide income for other families and people that are starting out. And so I think that it may not be your kids, but when you bring something to the world, you rub shoulders with other people, and you don't know what that's going to look like. So, a quick story would be that when we first started making our t-shirts, I spent $1,000, Erica, and I just remember like my knees were knocking. I mean, it felt like a ton of money. We got all these kids in braces, right? So, you had to get a certain amount to kind of get going, and I spent $1,000, and I just remember thinking like, what if these don't sell? And I was really nervous, and then in time things did sell, and so then you get more and you increase your inventory, and like years later The guy that we used to make our t-shirts, he was a family friend. He said, "You helped keep my business afloat during COVID." I mean, I had no idea, right? He said all the
Wow.
schools shut down, and so I used to make uniforms, and I used to do things for school uniforms and sports uniforms, and all of a sudden our business ground to a halt. And in Michigan, it was for a long time. It was like 15 months, 18 months. It was really long, but our t-shirts were selling, and so you just don't know. I think if you go into it solely thinking about your own dreams or your own thoughts about it, it can be hard to maintain the level needed to continue, like the level of grit needed, because a lot of things happen. Like your books get canceled, or I mean, things happen. You get the wrong order. People don't like what you. People are mean. They send you nasty notes. Stuff happens. So I think that when you realize that what you put out in the world opens doors for other people as well. You're not going to know what those are ahead of time, or your circles intersect and everybody lifts each other up. I think it's just an extra motivation to keep going.
Wow. I love that. That's huge. That's a write down and take that with me type of thing. Jenny, this was so wonderful for me. Before I let you go too, I just need to tell you, so I'll turn 40 in this next year. I'm like, when is it? I don't know.
Hmm.
I turn 40 at some point. And so before I do that, I created this 40 by 40 list on my list. And I
Hmm.
had like kind of a fun podcast series this summer about things that I did before I turned 30. And it was just like crazy, funny stories. Um, and for my 40 by 40 list, one thing on there is I wanted to connect with you. And so when I got that
Oh,
email that yeah, and when I
oh,
got the email that you were gonna come on the show, I no joke, I teared up and I was like, oh my gosh, like she is a personal hero of mine, of just like of a recent
aw.
inspiration. And so I just want to let you know that. And then two, I wrote down a list of people that I didn't know that were my wish list guests, and you were at the top of it. And so I think just the fact that you gave me the time means a lot. Your story and
Mm.
your whole vision is very inspirational, and so you're going to reach more people than you have already. And so I just thank you for that. And so I just wanted to let you know that this just meant a lot
Oh,
to me. So thank you.
wow. Wow, Erica, that is so sweet. I am just thrilled to be here. Also, I want to tell you that I love your bangs. They are phenomenal. And that's pretty much all I've been thinking about the whole time is how cool your bangs are. But this was such an opportunity to be here. I appreciate it. I love what you're doing. What a hopeful message to bring to people that it's not too late.
It's not.
And
And
you didn't miss the boat.
you
I
didn't.
love that.
And
Hmm.
neither did you. And Jenny, your book it's pre-ordered right now. People can order it through your website, 1000hours.com, 1000hoursoutside.com. They can order through Amazon, and they can find you on Instagram at 1000 hours outside, and your other books as well. And if anyone is interested in curriculum, there's resources on your website, and the t-shirts, support the business of the t-shirts. Jenny, is there anything else you want to share before we leave?
No, I just love that. It's not too late. I think you got to go after your dreams. What can you do to live fully today? Go after your dreams, and it really unfolds into a beautiful life. So, love what you're doing, and so thankful to be here. Thank you to everyone who's listened in and made it to the end. Wow, it was awesome spending this hour with you.
Thank you, Jenny.